The battlefield was soaked in blood. Spears cracked like thunder, drums wept. The earth trembled beneath the weight of warriors falling and rising again. And right there, in the heart of it all, stood a woman no one expected to survive. Her arms were thick like iroko trunks, her neck wrapped in coral beads, her cheeks full but firm, her eyes glowing like a burning moon. Enemies circled her like wolves, but she didn't flinch. A dying soldier, crawling in his own blood, whispered to another, "Is that the princess they call too fat to fight?" The other replied, "She's no princess anymore. She's the storm." And with one swing of her blade, she turned fear into legend. Welcome to Folktales by Chisom, where true African legends come to life. Please subscribe, like, and share. Once upon a time, in the ancient and powerful Kingdom of Ikemba, there lived a girl named Awele. She was the first and only daughter of King Igwemba, the Lion of Ukpo, a man known for his conquests and wisdom. But unlike the slim, agile princesses sung about in moonlight stories, Awele was born big. Not just big, massive. By age 10, her shoulders were broader than most boys in the palace. At 15, she had to walk sideways through narrow palace doors. Her feet shook the ground when she walked. Her voice, when raised, silenced even palace guards. But in a land where thinness was seen as strength and warriors were chosen for speed, Awele became a laughing stock. The princess who eats more than 10 men. She'll break the king's horse if she ever climbs it. Fat people don't go to war. They sit in the kitchen. The worst part, her own father, King Igwemba, avoided speaking of her in war meetings. When generals gathered to discuss battle, she wasn't allowed near the war chamber. They said her breathing alone would disrupt the strategies. But Awele watched. While other princesses danced or stitched clothes, Awele memorized maps. She listened from behind palace walls. She read books on ancient warfare. She studied the body language of soldiers, the battle cries of warriors, the weaknesses in their moves. She trained in silence. At night, she snuck out of the palace and sparred with street boys in the bush. She carried clay pots up mountains. She lifted logs twice her weight. She bled. She grew harder. She learned to take pain and smile through it. But nobody saw. To the kingdom, she was still just the fat girl they all laughed at. Until one day, the laughter stopped, because a shadow was rising, a storm was coming, and Awele would be the only one strong enough to stop it. The winds in Ikemba began to shift. It started with the disappearance of the Obioma traders, who traveled weekly from the eastern forests with spices, clay, and salt. One week, they simply didn't arrive. No cries, no warning, no bodies. Then came the blackened arrows, found sticking out of the thatched roofs of villages near the border. Strange, silent arrows dipped in burnt palm oil, a message the elders recognized. The vultures have awakened. The vultures of Udara Valley were no ordinary enemies. They were ruthless men without gods, exiled from their tribes for eating human flesh and killing their own mothers. Their leader, Oba Karu, was a monster clothed in a king's flesh. Tall, scarred, with eyes like dried blood. He didn't fight for land. He fought for fear. Village after village fell to them like termite-bitten trees. The people of Ikemba, once proud and mighty, began to whisper again, but this time not about Awele. They're coming. We need warriors. Where is the king? But King Igwemba had grown old and slower. His once booming voice was now soft, like broken drums. The war council sat in confusion. "We need to send scouts."
No, we must wait and pray. Let's send gifts and beg for peace. Foolishness filled the palace like smoke. Awele, sitting behind the great carved pillar during the meeting, as always, clenched her fists. Her body tensed. She had maps. She had ideas. She had traps drawn, but she wasn't called to speak. "Your place is with the women," a general once told her, laughing. "Let the men handle war." So she watched as grown men argued while the vultures flew closer. Then one night, while the moon hung low and red in the sky, it happened. The village of Isiuzo, just 3 rivers away from the capital, went silent. No drums, no smoke, no survivors, except one. A boy, naked and bleeding, ran into Ikemba screaming, "They are coming! They are coming! Their swords drink blood!" Ikemba shook. That very night, the sky wept rain as Oba Karu's warriors crossed into the borders. The palace sent a small team of warriors, led by General Azubuik, to push them back. They never returned. The elders called an emergency gathering. Warriors were summoned from across the lands. Awele stood outside, eavesdropping under the stormy sky. Inside they cried, "We must protect the throne. Where is the king? He must speak." But the king was not there. He had gone to pray in the forest shrine that night, and he never came back. The crown of Ikemba was now soaked in rain and blood. And in that moment of fear, of silence, of shattered confidence, a new voice would soon rise. Not thin, not soft, but thick like thunder and strong like war.
The next morning, the palace woke to screams, not war cries, not enemy horns, but wailing, deep, soul-tearing cries from the palace guards who returned from the forest shrine carrying only his staff, not his body. King Igwemba was gone. All they found was his broken leopard-toothed necklace, soaked in blood and mud, and a carved warning left on the tree beside the shrine, "The vultures have eaten the lion." The kingdom fell into confusion. The warriors argued, the priests wailed, the people trembled. The council of elders, 12 gray-bearded men who sat like statues, met in secret. Their voices rose like thunder behind carved wooden doors. One shouted, "There is no heir." Another replied, "We cannot let a woman lead." A third whispered what the others feared, "That fat girl." They all went silent. For all her bloodline and presence, Princess Awele had never been groomed to lead. No titles, no training, no trust, and yet, while the warriors buried their spears in fear, she stood still, watching, waiting, burning. That night, while the people lit fires and cried for their fallen king, Awele did not join them. She went to the underground war chamber, a place she had only seen from a distance, the room of kings and generals. She lit a single red torch. On the wall were maps, carved wooden figures, painted war symbols. She stepped closer. Her thick fingers ran across the map of Ikemba. Her wide eyes scanned the northern trail, the one left unguarded. Her heart beat not with fear, but with fury. Then she picked up a sword, her mother's sword, hidden all these years inside a hollowed bench. It was heavy, ancient, sharp. She held it with both hands, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel too fat. She felt ready. The next morning, as the sun broke through the fog of fear, a sound echoed across the kingdom, a sound no one expected. The massive palace doors swung open. The council was seated, dressed in red, murmuring prayers and arguments. Guards lined the halls, confused. Palace maids peeked from corners, and there, stepping into the war chamber in full battle regalia, coral beads bouncing on her chest, metal belt shining across her wide waist, scarlet war marks smeared across her cheeks, was Awele. Silence swallowed the room. She marched to the center, lifted her mother's sword, and slammed it into the war table. The king is dead, the crown is broken, but the kingdom still breathes. If no one will fight, I will. The council gasped. You? One elder spat. You, who cannot even run across the palace lawn? You, who the people call Elephant Princess? Owl smiled, not in anger, but in certainty. Then I will show them how elephants crush lions. She turned and walked out, the sword still gripped in her hand. The guards watched in silence, and before the sun set that day, rumors spread like wildfire through the villages. The fat girl wants to fight. The princess wears a sword now. Maybe, just maybe, she's our only hope. At first they came out of curiosity. Children standing on mortar stools, elders peeking from their mats, market women holding baskets but not moving. The sun was high, the ground dry, and the drums silent, until a loud, commanding horn sounded across the entire kingdom. From the palace gates, Awele emerged. But this was not the Awele they laughed at. She wore an armor of red leather and crocodile skin, handmade from materials she had stitched in private over the years. Her full arms glittered with bronze wrist blades. Her thick waist was wrapped in leopard skin. Her feet stomped the earth like thunder gods. And on her back was her mother's sword. She climbed a rock in the center of the village square and looked down at them all, the same people who mocked her, the same warriors who never trained her, the same guards who never bowed. I am Princess Awele, daughter of King Igwemba the Lion, granddaughter of Adaku the Great, and I speak not to beg, but to lead. Gasps. They say I am too fat to fight. They say my body is not for war. But let me ask you, did slimness protect Isiuzo? Did six-pack warriors bring back our king's head? A wave of murmurs spread. She stepped forward, her chest rising. If war comes for us, then we must become the war. If warriors will not fight, then women will. If generals will run, then I will lead. The crowd stiffened. But I will not beg. I will not plead. Those who wish to fight for Ikemba, meet me by River Nkwo at dawn. No titles, no bloodlines, just courage. She stepped down. The crowd parted. She walked through them like a mountain among stones, and slowly people began to whisper. Did you hear what she said? She wants to fight? Maybe the fat girl is not so foolish after all. That night, Awele did not sleep. She was in the blacksmith's corner, melting old tools into armor. She sharpened her sword. She wrapped cloth around her thighs. She fasted. She meditated. She whispered her mother's battle chants into the air. She expected no one to come. But at dawn, when the first rooster crowed, she heard footsteps, 1, then 2, then 10, then 20. By the time the sun peeked over River Nkwo, over 300 people stood behind her. Old hunters with missing teeth but steady hands. Young girls angry and barefoot but brave. Blacksmiths holding hammers like spears. Fishermen tying nets around their chests. They came not because she was perfect, but because she was the only one who dared to rise. And with that ragtag army, Awele began her war. A war they thought she could never fight. A war that would shake the soil of Ikemba. A war that would make her name echo through generations. The River Nkwo once sang gently through Ikemba's heart, but that day it howled. Mist rolled over its waters like smoke from an angry god. Birds scattered from the trees. Even the frogs fell silent. Something was coming. And it wasn't peace. Awele stood at the edge, her large feet buried in wet soil, her eyes locked on the tree line ahead. Behind her stood her mismatched army, hunters, maids, butchers, young boys with fire in their hearts, and women who had never held a weapon but knew pain like breath. "Today," she shouted, "we fight not with muscles but with memory." They pounded their chests. "We fight for Isiuzo. We fight for the king. We fight for ourselves." Then came the scream. A horn wailed across the river. Out from the woods emerged the vultures of Udara Valley, cloaked in black skins, heads painted in ash. Their leader for the raid, Captain Iyoro, the neck snapper, a brutal man known for cracking spines with one hand. He looked at Awele's army and laughed. "This is what Ikemba sends?" he bellowed. "Fishermen, women, a fat princess? Today I'll use your belly as a drum." His men laughed wildly, but Awele didn't flinch. She whispered something to a young boy beside her. "Signal the fireflies." The boy lit a small pouch and tossed it across the grass behind the enemy. Seconds later, boom! A wall of fire exploded behind the vultures. Confusion, screaming, burning. Awele had laced the field with dried palm oil and crushed firestone. Before they could recover, she roared, "For Ikemba!" And they charged. Her warriors were not trained, but they were angry and desperate and free. Awele led the charge, her body moving like thunder, her blade slicing like a falling tree branch. She did not fight with elegance. She fought with power. One slash sent 2 vultures flying. One stomp crushed a foot. One roar sent a man fleeing into the river. The battle was ugly, it was loud, and it was victory. When it was over, blood stained the river red. 15 of Awele's people had fallen, but over 60 vultures were dead, including Captain Iyoro, whose skull Awele cracked with a single swing to the neck. Her people wept, not for the dead, but for the miracle they had just witnessed. She fought like a beast, like a goddess. Did you see how she moved? She is not fat, she is fury. That night, they lit fires around River Nkwo. They sang. Awele stood alone by the riverbank, wiping her blade, her body aching, but her heart alive. She had bled for the people, and the people had bled for her. The fat girl who was never invited to battle had won one, and it wouldn't be her last. After the victory at River Nkwo, Awele's name soared. All across Ikemba, villagers chanted her war cries. Children practiced holding spoons like swords. Mothers sang her praises as they pounded yam. But while the people rejoiced, envy brewed in the shadows. One man in particular, General Nduka, a proud, sharp-jawed warrior who once trained King Igwemba's soldiers, burned with jealousy. "What makes her worthy?" he hissed. "This girl whose shadow blocks the sun, who let her wear armor?" Nduka had lost his status the day Awele rose. His army had fled from Oba Karu. His pride was bleeding, and he wanted it back. So when Awele announced a move to retake Obibi Hills, the last lookout post before the capital, Nduka stepped forward. "Let me lead your left flank," he offered, bowing low. "I know those hills. I trained there." Awele hesitated. Her instincts whispered, but she needed someone who knew the terrain. "I will trust you," she said, "but betray me, and the gods themselves will not hide you." He smiled and bowed again. At dawn, Awele's forces advanced through the thick forests of Obibi Hills. The air was heavy with silence. Birds refused to sing. Awele's main force took the central path, while Nduka led a smaller team to flank the enemy from behind. At the top of the hill, they saw the vultures waiting, too calm, too ready. Something was wrong. Suddenly, the forest erupted with war cries. From behind, it was Nduka. He had led his team into an ambush, and not by mistake. He had made a secret pact with Oba Karu, offering Awele's head in exchange for land and gold. Awele and her warriors were surrounded. Panic spread. Spears flew from the trees. Arrows pierced shields. People screamed. The drums of betrayal beat louder than war. Awele fought like a wild beast, her blade flashing like lightning, her breath ragged, her armor cracked. But her people were falling fast. She was bleeding from her shoulder when she shouted, "Retreat to the cave! Fall back!" They ran toward a narrow path leading to an old hunter's cave, one Awele had remembered from her secret childhood adventures. They stumbled inside, wounded, bloody, panting. "We're trapped," a soldier cried. "They'll burn us alive." But Awele didn't panic. She turned to the girl beside her, a 12-year-old water seller turned warrior. "Fetch the oil jars." The girl blinked. "The ones with bees inside," Awele said. "Yes, bees, wild ones, deadly. Trapped inside clay jars Awele had prepared weeks before, just in case." As the vultures closed in, torches lit and weapons drawn, Awele rolled the jars down the hill. Crack, crack! The jars broke. The angry swarm exploded into the air. Thousands of bees, disturbed, furious, stinging anything that moved. The vultures screamed. They ran blindly, slapping themselves, falling into their own traps. Fire spilled, oil spread, the grass ignited, flames rose through the hills like judgment. Awele and her people watched from inside the cave as the enemy screamed and scattered. Smoke curled into the sky. By morning, Obibi Hills belonged to Ikemba again. As for General Nduka, he was found crawling, stung, and half-blind. Awele dragged him to the center of the burnt hill. The people gathered. "You betrayed your own," she said, "and you thought I would beg for mercy." She did not kill him. She stripped him of his armor, broke his sword, and had him march through the kingdom in chains, a sign to all. No traitor will wear the name of Ikemba again. Awele's face was cut, her arm bandaged, her armor blackened, but her eyes, they were sharper than ever. The people no longer called her fat. They called her fire. After the flames of Obibi Hill settled and the traitor General Nduka was chained and paraded through Ikemba, one truth remained. Oba Karu was coming. Not his soldiers, not his captains. Himself, the Butcher King, the man whose name alone had silenced kingdoms. He marched with 2,000 hardened warriors, and his words were clear. "Bring me the fat girl they call Queen. I will end her in front of her people." Fear swept Ikemba like plague. Some fled, some doubted. But Awele did not shake. She stood before her people with fresh scars still healing from Obibi Hills, and spoke with thunder. "If we run, we lose not just land, we lose our names. Let the earth remember we stood. Let the wind carry our cries. Let them say, we fought." The next morning, the Battle of Igwemba Plains began. Oba Karu's army thundered across the dry earth, spears raised, war drums deafening. On the other side, Awele stood barefoot, sword in hand, her mismatched warriors behind her. Farmers, girls, blacksmiths, hunters. And when the horns blew, hell broke loose. Spears clashed, arrows flew, dust turned to smoke, blood kissed the soil. Awele roared like a wounded lion, cutting down enemies with raw power. Her warriors screamed her name with each kill, and then, through the chaos, Oba Karu rode in. His twin axes gleamed. His horse crushed men under hoof. He charged straight at her. "Come, fat queen!" he roared. She met him head on. Their blades sang. She was cut, but did not fall. She bled, but struck back harder. Then, using her full body like a crashing wave, she knocked him off his horse and challenged him to stand. He rose. They circled. They fought like gods. Then, in a flash, she drove her sword into his chest. He gasped. "You were never meant—" "I was meant to end you," she whispered, and twisted the blade. Oba Karu collapsed. His army froze, and the people of Ikemba erupted. They begged Awele to take the crown, but she refused. "Let the throne remain empty. I will raise warriors instead." She melted the royal crown and forged it into blades and armor, birthing the daughters of the Red Earth, a fearless band of warrior women who rose from ashes and mockery. Awele never ruled from a seat, but she ruled every heart. And when she died, old but unbroken, they buried her not in the palace, but on the battlefield she made holy. A stone marked her grave. Here lies the girl they called too fat to fight. But she fought. She led. She won.